So, hi everybody. Today I am here with Marcos Vélez. He is the one of the candidates for lieutenant governor. And if you didn't know, lieutenant governor is the person who is in charge of the Texas Senate. So this is a very big role. They're kind of like the person who bosses the senators around, which I like. Marcos, thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you just take a couple minutes just to tell us a little bit more about like who you are, where you're from, why did you get into this race? Because we would love to hear about that.
Yes, ma'am. So my name is Marcos Velez. I'm a labor union activist, labor leader. I grew up in the Houston area. I actually grew up in Pasadena, which if you live in Houston, Pasadena is not considered Houston, but greater Houston area. After high school, got involved in heavy industry and found myself working in an oil refinery. It was a unionized plant. And safety and coworker advocacy was what really led me to a career in organized labor. Got actively involved negotiating our contract there at the plant, where we fought for better wages, safer working conditions, better healthcare coverage, things that matter to everybody. And that really led to a passion and a career where now I'm the assistant director. I'm responsible for Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Arkansas, part of Aruba, and bargain contracts that cover workers all across those areas. We deal with multinational corporations that have a larger annual profit than Texas's biannual budget. And again, very proud of the work that we do. We have some of the highest wages in the state, some of the lowest healthcare costs, some of the most inclusive plans, and very firmly rooted in equality, civil rights, and other things that matter to all working people. I got involved in this race because I look at how far we've slid back over the last 30 years. When I came out of high school, jobs were easy to find. You could literally leave one good paying job and land in another one almost next door. Jobs are incredibly hard to find. I'm watching the people that are my children's age graduate from college with insurmountable student debt that they couldn't pay off in 10 lifetimes. I'm watching members of the LGBTQ plus community leave the state because they're being targeted and marginalized. I look at my daughters who question what rights they have in this state. Given the way that women have been targeted, and that's not who we are as Texans. Look, my neighbor is being shoved into vans and kidnapped. That is not who we are as Texans, and so that's why I'm running, because I believe the Texas legislature is focused on things that benefit the uber wealthy, and they're not focusing on policies that elevate normal working people, raising the state minimum wage, improving access to jobs, lowering healthcare costs and expanding access, funding public schools. I mean, those are things that matter to Texans, and they are not being prioritized in the Texas Senate.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the lieutenant governor, I mean, that's a very powerful role, and they don't write legislation or pass legislation, but they're very much responsible for driving what legislation gets passed, and what legislation gets put on the calendar and things like that. As far as the Senate side goes, do you have a list of priorities, like a top 3 or top 5 priorities that you would want to focus on if you are elected?
Yes, ma'am. So first and foremost, we have to raise the state minimum wage. I think that's the most important. A lot of people would argue, well, I don't make minimum wage. If you do not make a living wage, you're in that boat. If you look like $7.25 an hour, 2,080 hours, you're probably bringing in somewhere about $15,000 a year. If you're renting a one-bedroom apartment, average one-bedroom apartment is about $1,300 a month. That's $16,000 a year. You're in the hole. You're in the negative before you ever paid any other bill. And so we have to ensure that all labor is respected as labor and paid as such, and people are able to support a family. One job should be enough. Once we move beyond the state minimum wage, along with that same economic opportunity, we have to expand apprenticeship programs and ensure that young people and old alike are able to pursue family sustaining careers and upskill themselves at no cost to them. And the lieutenant governor does have a large amount of power over state sponsored apprenticeship programs. After that, we have to focus on public education. The voucher scam is disgusting. It's going to disproportionately affect rural Texas. We took $1 billion out of public education, but we've been defunding education for quite some time. Many people would argue that we've spent more money on education this year than ever before. In my opinion, that's a game of hide the ball, because the reality is, while the total dollar amount has gone up, the dollars per student is one of the lowest in the nation, and it's unacceptable. We funding schools means paying teachers a living wage. It's a career, and it's a career that you should be able to retire from. We should fund their retirements. And then when you get into that third one, I think affordability for housing. So we have to ensure that we have programs that, one, build affordable housing, but two, for people that are in some type of housing insecurity, we have to make sure that we have programs that allow them to live with dignity. And I think once you get past those, we could go on for hours. But if we can take care of wages and economic opportunity, move on to funding public schools, and then look at the housing crisis that we have in the state, those would be an ambitious first three.
Okay, I like those. So you're from Houston.
Yes, ma'am.
Houston is like the um oil and gas headquarter capital. That's where all the, Chevron and Exxon headquarters are. Um, but also, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, that Texas is really leading the way for clean energy.
Yes,
We have a lot of like windmills. We have a lot of solar power, and Republicans have been really, really pushing against it. What is your position on clean energy? Do you think that we should be moving in that direction? How do we handle that? As far as the oil jobs or the fossil fuel industry, and their reliance on the school funding. And what are your thoughts about that?
so a lot in that question. So
A lot in that question, yeah.
let's
It's
break it
kind of a
into.
multi-party question.
No, it's a great question. Let's break it into pieces. I am an oil worker, come from an oil refinery. I'm very cognizant of the fact that we all have to live on this planet. When oil workers somewhat push back against the notion of the green economy, it's because our experiences over time have been that when one industry is shut down, there is no true just transition. So if you look at the auto workers in Detroit, as that industry talent turned downward, a lot of them were forced into the service industry, and the service industry is great, but it doesn't pay the same as manufacturing in a lot of instances. I'm a big supporter of all of the above energy. I believe that we have to harness wind, we have to harness solar. Look, if you look at this state, we have resources that could improve our stability of our grid, that are not being utilized because of partisan politics. And so, one, I believe that we need to move in the direction of supporting all of the above energy. There's no such thing as too much. I do support oil jobs because, again, as an oil worker, I believe that it's an industry that's vital. But I also believe that anytime we shut down any kind of new technology, we run the risk of following the same path of Sears. And a lot of people would say, well, what does that have to do with anything? But had Sears innovated and kept up with the times, they would be Amazon. Sears was the store where you went in and bought all of your stuff. It was because they did not advance with the times that a new store emerged and kind of overtook their market share. And so, big supporter of clean energy, but also a big supporter of maintaining uh, any form of energy open until we can safely transition, and transition in a way that doesn't leave workers behind. Then the next part of the question, we were talking about funding public education.
Yeah, public education.
So there's a big problem with that. They
Yes.
paying their fair share. Most Texans have a higher effective tax rate than big oil, and so we could talk about all the millions of dollars that they dump into school. Hey, great, but again, if you look at your average homeowner, their property tax burden, especially on their school district taxes, is significantly higher when you compare it to their income than any of these oil giants. And so, look, they need to pay more into the system. It's only fair. We have this system of socialism for corporations and rugged individualism for people. Martin Luther King said it. It's always resonated with me. We have to do more to make sure that corporations are carrying their fair share of the burden.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you've seen this recently. Dan Patrick put out his priorities. If he were to win, I'm real hopeful for Democrats in November. But if he were to win, that his priority is to lower property taxes once again. And I have a friend who has been looking at this, and she's promising to write an article about it. We haven't seen that article yet, but we'll hopefully see it soon. that since Greg Abbott has taken office in, what was that, 2014?
14?
Uh,
Yes.
yeah, 2014, that Republicans have consistently said, "We'll lower taxes, we'll lower taxes, we'll lower taxes," and yet home property taxes have gone up like 50% or something like that, 53%, year over year over year, and yet every single legislative session, they're like, "We just passed the biggest tax, rebate or tax, break in history." And it really, at this point, feels like a scam because when I Google it, they say that Texas has the fifth highest property taxes in America. And what is your understanding of that situation? And, maybe you could explain it to me, to us, and how do we get about it? Because every time I get this blue paper in, like March or April, and they're like, guess what? You got to pay an extra $500 than you did
Oh, yeah.
last year. And I'm like, I thought I was getting, lower property taxes, but I never do.
You look at Texas's tax policy, and I feel like it's extremely regressive towards people in the middle class and any other socioeconomic level that comes below the middle class. Every single year, they raise our home appraisal value. Hey, look, you're not selling your home; you're living there. That appraisal value does nothing but raise your tax burden. But again, we don't have the same power to fight these appraisals like these multinational corporations do. Some of these multinational corporations operating completely tax free, and so when you look at their argument that they're lowering property taxes, it does me no good for you to reduce my tax rate by a quarter of a percent. So that my taxes would have fallen $300 or $400, but then you raise my home appraisal by 20%. And again, what you're actually coming out of pocket is either exactly the same or higher than what you paid the year before. When you talk to most people in organized labor, we have members all across the state, the district. When people look at their property taxes, if you bought your home on a 30-year mortgage or even a 15-year mortgage, a lot of people's property taxes are just as high or higher than what their original mortgage was 15 or 20 years ago. And it's crushing homeowners. We can explore additional revenue streams for the state. I'm a big proponent of legalizing THC. I believe that we have to be honest about the fact that a lot of the rhetoric around gambling bringing vice, you can cross the state line and only go a couple miles and have gambling within your fingertips. And so that's tax money that is leaving the state, and we're carrying this moral burden by paying exorbitantly high property taxes. And so I believe if we had a lieutenant governor that was interested in actually exploring ways to replace that revenue, we could actually lower property taxes and give homeowners relief. But again, we take this moral high ground and we say, well, we're not going to legalize gambling because it's a sin. It's only a sin if that's your religious belief. And then again, we should have a separation of church and state. If you believe that gambling is a sin, don't gamble.
Yeah.
Um, so when you talk about plans, I believe that through the legalization of THC and through the legalization of gambling in the state, we could ensure that that tax revenue that, through regulation, is directly used to replace the income lost by us reducing property taxes in a meaningful way. We also have to look at some legislation to protect home values. Hey, look, these appraisals, your ability to protest them is relatively limited. And if you hire an attorney to protest them for you, nothing against attorneys, but they get a portion of the savings that you see. So, uh, hey, it's really one of those things where I think we have to explore additional revenue streams instead of just campaigning on tax relief that never comes.
Okay. Yeah, and so I have read studies that said if we, pass, or legalize THC, that could bring an extra $2 to $3 billion in tax revenue, to Texas. Now, there has been, I know, like, on Lone Star Left, we have been talking about, legalizing gambling, quite a bit recently just because of the Senate drama, which we're not gonna talk about. Um, yeah, but I ran a poll on this, and my audience leans heavily progressive, and it was like about 44% of the pool, agreed that they would like to see, legalize gambling, and another 20% said they would want more information. And I think that if we did legalize gambling in Texas, that we would also want to see, like, some heavy guardrails and, regulations in place to, prevent, like, addiction and, crime and things like that. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. Well, and not just those guardrails. Yes, you need all of those guardrails, but I think the most important thing with the legalization of these new revenue streams is ensuring that we codify how the revenue will be used so that it actually goes to its intended purpose. I think when you talk about gambling, one of the biggest arguments you hear from people is, well, the Texas lottery was supposed to fund education, and look at the percentage of it that actually goes to education now. And but look, that's our responsibility to ensure that when we legalize these new revenue streams, that we actually codify how the revenue will be used.
Okay. And so, another thing, the corporate tax abatements, um, should we eliminate those or reduce those? Or
Look,
just is it a case by case scenario?
I think in general we should eliminate them. But when you look, there are certain corporations, because not all corporations are the same size. If you have a small uh, if anyone could form a corporation, if you have a small corporation that employs like four people, but they do good work in the community and they're not taking advantage, hey, look, we should definitely look at ways that we can help small business. When you look at large multinational corporations, there's really no reason that we should again have welfare for the uber rich.
Right, right. Um, which, what actually is a great segment, welfare. So right now in Texas, our state has like one of the highest food insecurities of all of America, especially like among children. And I think it's like one out of every four or one out of every five kids in Texas are food insecure, that, they go to bed hungry sometimes. We don't have free breakfast and free lunch programs in every school. We don't have, a really like a safety net for these children over the summertime. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, is that something that we should be prioritizing as a state, as a society?
No, definitely, right? I mean, look, it's heartbreaking. Very proud of the fact that always been relatively involved in my community, more in some arenas than others. But one of the most heartbreaking things that I participated in, there was a program at my kids' school. It was called the Backpack Buddies. And basically, moms and dads would go up to the school and you'd sneak into classes and you would abscond children's backpacks and you would hide food in it so that they wouldn't be shamed because those children had nothing to eat at home. And so you'd go in and kids were playing over here to the side. We'd grab the identified backpacks and you'd put non-perishable goods in those backpacks. And it was really heartbreaking to know these kids that came to play at our home or that went on field trips like that, they went hungry at night. But then when you look at the fact that we have the eighth largest economy in the world, the seventh largest by some measures, we'll be conservative in poll numbers and very progressive in our policies. Let's be conservative and say the eighth largest. Why do we have children that go hungry at night? It's unacceptable. I mean, we have to invest in feeding children that would otherwise go hungry. And I don't know anyone that could argue against that with a straight face.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So just to back up a little bit, because you mentioned about your kids earlier going to college and having, debt and not finding a job. So right now, like if people go to a community college and they're in-state residents, I mean, they're not going to come out with debt. But if they're going to go to a university, they're going to have a lot of college debt. So do you think that college students, in-state residents, should be able to go to university without debt? Or, I mean, do you think that should be something that's offered debt free? I mean, what are your thoughts on that for Texas universities?
I think college education should have the lowest barrier to entry that we can create. And so any programs that we can promote, that we can pass that would lower the cost of education. In a perfect world, I do believe that college should be free. I don't understand why anyone would argue against supporting our youth educating themselves. They're the ones that are going to care for us in our old age. You don't want the doctor that got D's because he was working three jobs. I want the doctor that was able to focus on his education and actually make something of himself. And so, big supporter of obviously supporting public education and ensuring that we fund it so that students don't have to carry the burden, but also it allows people to actually pursue their passion instead of chasing after a career that's going to allow them to pay that student debt down, which they may not have a passion for. So no, I believe that state education should be free.
So, I'm glad you mentioned doctors, because right now Republicans, just seem hell bent on driving doctors out of our state.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, we are closing down rural hospitals, rural community medical centers left and right. We're ostracizing OBGYNs. We're doing a lot of really bad stuff. So how do we fix our healthcare crisis in Texas?
I think a lot of problems stem from the fact that one, we're focused on identity politics, we're partisan wars. Those are things that win election. When you anger people, when you stir up your base through division, it's really easy to stay in your spot as an elected official. When you focus on issues and you speak to things that matter to people, they're somewhat divisive because if we say that, hey, we support this stance or that stance, you may alienate a certain part of your constituency, but you have to be true to yourself. When I look at resolving the healthcare system, we have to fund healthcare in the state of Texas. We have one of the highest rates of uninsured people in the nation. It's unacceptable. We have to ensure that we return uh like the ability to actually practice medicine to doctors. We should not be prosecuting doctors. They went to school. They're medical professionals. Legislators do not know more about healthcare than doctors do. No different than legislators do not know about more about education than teachers do, right? These attacks that we've been seeing in the media directed towards really the most educated people in society. We attack scientists and we disavow any kind of acceptance of science. We disavow any kind of acceptance of well-established educational principles. We're attacking the healthcare community, even though none of the people pushing this legislation went to medical school. Well, we have to get back to accepting science, facts, and reason, and not targeting people for political gain.
Yeah, yeah. And I would like to most of them didn't go to medical school, and there is one, Donna Campbell, which I
Oh,
have to mention.
true.
Yeah, she's in the Senate, but it's crazy because there was a Senate hearing, and this is just never, ever, ever leaves my mind, because she's a doctor, and a man walked into a Senate hearing and he was wearing a T-shirt, and it said, "The Big Bang, um, theory is just a theory," and she was like, "Oh, I love your T-shirt," and I was like, "Oh my god," so that's our doctors that are on the Senate. So, um, but yeah, I mean, like, I really like what you're saying. I mean, and I think that, my audience will like what you're saying. So if you do win the Democratic primary, and you go on and you're facing Dan Patrick in November, what is it gonna take for you to, beat this person who, has been in office for, many years now and, who has a big war chest and, is going to play the culture war game?
So we're going to stay true to our message. From day one of launching this campaign, we've always been the underdog. I believe that we win our primary. If you look at the amount of support we've received and the fact that I've already worked all across the state, I know working class people in just about every one of the Texas counties. Uh, I believe that we stay true to our message. And hey, they can play culture wars in the same tired message of division, but we're gonna campaign on policies that benefit people's pocketbooks. We need to raise wages. We need to lower healthcare costs. We need to expand access to healthcare. We need to ensure that that mom sitting at home isn't worried about paying her light bill. She's able to thrive and take her kids on vacation. We need to make sure that the dad that's sitting on the couch that's been laid off for 6 months is able to find gainful employment. The man in his 50s that's worried about his job going away is able to enter an apprenticeship program and upskill himself so that there's opportunity. That college student is able to graduate and not drown in student debt. Those are things that matter to people. I asked a guy the other day, he was railing against the LGBTQ plus community. And I said, let me ask you something. I said, if you could make $30,000 a year and live in a relatively racially gender homogenous neighborhood where you're making 30 grand, but everybody's exactly like you. Or you can make $300,000, but both of your neighbors are from the LGBTQ plus community. Where would you rather live and which income would you rather have? And he goes, oh, making that kind of money, I don't care who my neighbors are. And I think when we focus people on the hierarchy of needs and things that really matter, all of those identity politics that divide us really don't matter. I'm not saying it's okay to be biased or to be a bigot, but look, we're going to talk to people where they're at, and we're going to remind them that they can buy into culture wars to their own detriment, or they can support a campaign that's rooted in the elevation of all.
Okay, I like it. So again, you guys, this is Marcos Velez. He's
Yes, ma'am.
running for the lieutenant governor position in the Democratic primary. And so, where can people find you online? What's your website address? If you want to give you like a closing statement for a minute or two.
Yes, ma'am. Hey, so look, be honored for people to go check out our campaign. I always tell everybody, whether you vote for us or not, please go and vote. Early voting starts February 17th. But our website, Velez for Texas, Velez, Fortexas, and we're also on Blue Sky. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok, uh, X, and all pretty much the same handle, Velez for Texas.
Okay, perfect. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us today and letting us get to know some of your policy positions. And I look forward to seeing you out there and on the ballot.
Yes, ma'am. Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, you have a wonderful day.
You too.
Bye bye.